Welcome to Inside Vietnam. I'm your host, and today's story is one that's going to stay with you long after you finish watching. His name is Declan O'Sullivan. He's 61 years old, Irish, from County Cork. Spent over 40 years as a professional chef in some of the best kitchens across Ireland and the UK. A man who knew food, knew hard work, knew how to spot when something wasn't right in a dish before it left his kitchen. But when he came to Vietnam 3 years ago, looking to rebuild his life after a devastating divorce, he met someone who seemed to offer everything he'd lost: a partnership, a dream, a chance to create something beautiful again in a country where he could afford to breathe. What happened next changed everything. This isn't a romance scam story. This was business, professional, family involved. It felt different from all the warnings he'd heard. That's what made it so effective. By the time Declan realized what was actually happening, it was already too late. The truth he discovered 2 weeks before opening day will make you understand why paperwork matters more than promises, and why desperation to rebuild makes even the smartest people ignore their own instincts. This one's going to stick with you. Here's his story, in his own words. My name's Declan O'Sullivan, and for 42 years, my identity was wrapped up in professional kitchens. Hotel restaurants in Dublin and Cork, gastropubs across Ireland, a few years in London, working in places that weren't quite Michelin-starred but weren't far off either. I was good. Not celebrity chef good, but solid, reliable. The kind of chef who never missed a service, who could coax something special from ordinary ingredients, who took pride in consistency. Cooking was my language. In a kitchen, everything made sense. You followed technique, you respected ingredients, you tasted as you went, you delivered quality. Do those things right and the rest took care of itself. I built my whole life around that philosophy. Then one evening, 3 years ago, my wife of 28 years sat me down in our Dublin kitchen and said she wanted out. I won't lie to you, I didn't see it coming. Maybe I should have. Maybe there were signs I missed while working double shifts or obsessing over menu development. But that conversation hit me like a freight train. We'd raised 2 children together. We'd built a life. I thought we were solid. The divorce was surgical, efficient. Her solicitor was better than mine. Or maybe I just didn't have the fight in me. She got the house we'd lived in for 18 years. She got the majority of my pension contributions. She even got the 1974 Alfa Romeo Spider I'd spent 5 years restoring in our garage, piece by piece, every Sunday afternoon I had free. That car hurt almost as much as everything else. Stupid, I know. But I poured myself into that restoration the way I poured myself into creating the perfect stock. It was mine. Except legally it wasn't, because I'd registered it in her name for insurance reasons years back. The settlement left me with €85,000 and a monthly pension of $1,800. Not destitute, but not exactly set for life either. Certainly not enough to stay in Dublin. I moved to Cork, rented a flat above a little supermarket. The rent was cheap and the location was practical, which is a polite way of saying it was depressing as hell. I could hear the refrigeration units humming through the floor at night. The stairs smelled like disinfectant and yesterday's produce. I kept working, picking up chef positions here and there, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I'd watch younger chefs get jobs I once would have had, positions I was probably overqualified for but couldn't land because I was nearly 60 and looked tired, which I was. My daughter got married that year. Beautiful ceremony, and I was happy for her, genuinely. But standing there in my rented morning suit, making small talk with relatives who all knew about the divorce, I felt like a ghost at my own life. Present, but not really there. 2 years of that. 2 years of going through motions, of cooking without passion, of living in a flat above a supermarket and wondering if this was it. If this was what the rest of my life looked like. Then one afternoon, having a smoke break behind the hotel where I was doing a temporary stint, another chef mentioned Vietnam. He'd been there on holiday. Dirt cheap, he said. Warm year-round. Food culture that actually respected ingredients and technique, not like the processed rubbish taking over European kitchens. You could live well on a pension. Hell, you could even open a small place if you wanted. None of the crushing overheads that made restaurant ownership impossible in Ireland. That conversation planted something in my head. That night, I started researching. Obsessively, really. I'd come home from work, pour a whiskey, and lose myself in videos and articles about Vietnam. Hoi An kept appearing in my searches. UNESCO World Heritage Town. Colonial architecture. An actual food scene that blended Vietnamese and Western influences. Growing expat community. Restaurant culture that catered to both tourists and locals. affordable property, reasonable cost of living. I started doing numbers. My pension would go 3 times further there. My settlement could fund a small restaurant, something intimate, maybe 40 seats. I could do what I loved without the weight of Dublin rents and Irish labor costs crushing me. My children thought I was having some kind of breakdown. My daughter came to visit, sat in my depressing flat, gently suggested maybe I should talk to someone before making big decisions. My son sent concerned texts asking if I was okay, really okay. But here's the thing, I wasn't running away. That's what I told myself, anyway. This was practical, strategic. A chef with my experience, in a town hungry for authentic European food, with enough capital to start something small and sustainable. This wasn't some midlife crisis. This was a sound business decision. Looking back now, I can see I was lying to myself. I was absolutely running away. From the flat above the little, from the pitying looks, from the reality that I'd worked my entire adult life and had almost nothing to show for it except the modest pension and a divorce settlement. From the feeling of being invisible, used up, unnecessary. I wanted to matter again. I wanted to build something beautiful. And I wanted to do it somewhere far enough away that if I failed, nobody from my old life would have to watch. 3 months after that smoke break conversation, I bought a one-way ticket to Da Nang. I packed 2 suitcases, my professional knife kit in a special case, and €85,000 in my bank account that represented everything I had left in the world. I didn't tell many people I was leaving. Easier that way. Less explaining, less defending my decision, less opportunity for doubt to creep in. The night before my flight, I sat in that flat above the little for the last time, drinking whiskey and thinking about the Alfa Romeo, about the house with the kitchen where my wife had ended our marriage, about all the years in professional kitchens that had somehow led me here, alone, about to disappear to the other side of the world. Part of me knew I was being reckless, but a bigger part of me didn't care anymore. What did I have to lose? What was I protecting by staying? I finished the whiskey, washed the glass, and left it drying by the sink for whoever came next. The next morning, I flew to Vietnam. I landed in Da Nang on a Tuesday afternoon in February, and the heat hit me like opening an industrial oven. 32 degrees, humidity thick enough to chew. I'd researched the climate, obviously, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it wrap around you like a hot towel are different things entirely. The taxi to Hoi An took about 40 minutes, driving through countryside that looked nothing like Ireland. Rice paddies, water buffalo, women in conical hats working fields. Everything green and wet and alive. The driver spoke no English, which suited me fine. I wasn't ready for conversation yet. Hoi in itself was beautiful in a way that felt almost theatrical. Yellow colonial buildings with Chinese lanterns hanging everywhere. Narrow streets designed for foot traffic, not cars. The Thu Bon River cutting through the center, reflecting colored lights, even in daylight. UNESCO World Heritage Site, my research had said. What that meant in practice was a town that looked like a film set, meticulously preserved, increasingly designed for tourists. I'd rented a small apartment site unseen through an expat Facebook group. 1 bedroom, basic kitchen, balcony overlooking a side street. $350 a month, which felt obscenely cheap compared to Cork. The landlady was Vietnamese, spoke reasonable English, showed me how the water heater worked and where to buy gas for the stove. She seemed bemused by my knife kit, but nodded approvingly when I unpacked it carefully, laying each blade on a towel like they were surgical instruments. Those first few weeks, I was just trying to orient myself, learning the rhythms of the place. The morning markets opened at 5, when it was still relatively cool. By noon, the heat drove everyone indoors. Evenings came alive again around 6. Restaurants filling, lanterns lit, tour groups photographing everything. I avoided the expat scene initially. There were bars where Western men congregated, usually older guys with much younger Vietnamese girlfriends. I'd see them at cafes, hear snippets of conversation. The stories were always variations on a theme. Came for a holiday, met a girl, decided to stay. Family needs help with this or that. Building a house in the countryside. Visa complications. Money sent home that never quite accomplished what it was supposed to. It made me uncomfortable, not judgmental exactly. More like I was looking at possible futures I wanted to avoid. Instead, I threw myself into understanding food culture. That's what I knew. That's where I was comfortable. The Central Market became my daily destination. I'd arrive early, when vendors were still setting up, and just watch. Learn the seasonal rhythms, see what ingredients were available, observe how locals shopped versus tourists. The produce was incredible. Herbs I'd only seen dried in European markets, here fresh and abundant. Dragon fruit, rambutan, mangosteen, fish pulled from the sea that morning, still rigid with rigor mortis. I started cooking again, just for myself in my small apartment, testing Vietnamese ingredients with European techniques. Lemongrass in a beurre blanc, local shrimp with garlic butter, pork belly braised in fish sauce instead of wine. Some combinations worked brilliantly, others were disasters. But I was engaged again, thinking, experimenting, caring about the outcome. That's what I was doing 6 weeks in, examining produce at the central market with the focus I'd once brought to supplier selection in Dublin when she approached me. I was holding a bunch of morning glory, checking the stems for freshness, when I heard a voice behind me in perfect English. "You shop like a chef." I turned. She was Vietnamese, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Professional looking. Not what I'd come to recognize as the bar girl uniform of tight dresses and heavy makeup. "Guilty as charged," I said. 42 years in kitchens. "Hard to shake the habit," she smiled. "I'm Lynn. I help expats navigate the restaurant business here. Permits, suppliers, all the impossible bureaucracy." "You're opening a place?" "Thinking about it," I admitted, still in research phase. She switched to Vietnamese, speaking rapidly to the vegetable vendor, who laughed and pulled out better quality morning glory from under the stall. "For him," she said, nodding at me. "Chef price." We got talking, really talking, in a way I hadn't with anyone since arriving. She knew food, understood ingredients, could discuss techniques intelligently. She'd worked in hospitality in Saigon before returning to Hoi An, now consulted for expats trying to navigate Vietnamese business culture. The permit process, she said, was deliberately opaque, designed to require local knowledge, local connections. Most foreigners gave up or got scammed. "Coffee?" she suggested. We walked to a small cafe overlooking the river, sat at a plastic table under a faded umbrella. She ordered in Vietnamese, and the owner brought proper Vietnamese coffee, thick and sweet, served over ice. The kind tourists usually couldn't find. "So what's your concept?" Lynn asked. I found myself explaining more than I'd intended. European food, but using Vietnamese ingredients where it made sense. French techniques I'd learned in London, Irish comfort food elevated with local touches. 40 seats, intimate, focused menu. Something authentic, not tourist trap versions of Western food. She listened carefully, asked smart questions. About sourcing, about price points, about whether I'd considered how Vietnamese palates might differ from European ones on seasoning, spice, portion sizes. Then she said something that changed everything. "I've dreamed about opening exactly that kind of place. Real European food, not tourist versions. But I'm not a chef. I know the business side, the local connections, the permit maze. My father owns property. But I need someone who actually knows how to cook at that level, someone with vision." Looking back now, I can see how perfectly calibrated that was, not asking for money, not suggesting romance, just recognizing mutual need. Professional partnership. Business. At the time, it felt like fate. We met the next day, and the day after that. Within a week, we were sketching concepts on napkins, discussing menu ideas, visiting potential supplier relationships she'd cultivated. She introduced me to wholesalers who'd give fair prices, showed me how to spot quality in Vietnamese markets, explained cultural contexts I'd have missed on my own. 2 weeks after we met, I cooked for her family. She'd invited me to her parents' home in the outskirts of Hoi An, a modest house with a small shrine near the entrance. Her father, older and quiet, spoke minimal English. Her mother fussed in that universal way mothers do regardless of language. And her grandmother, tiny and ancient, watched me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I made coq au vin, classic French technique, but using local chicken from the market that morning, Vietnamese fish sauce, adding depth to the wine reduction. I'd brought my own knives, worked in their small kitchen while Lynn translated between her family's questions and my explanations. When her grandmother tasted it, she went very quiet. Then she started crying. Lynn translated, "It tastes like memory," like her French teacher in Saigon in the 1960s used to describe. She'd never actually eaten it before, but this is exactly what he said it should be. That moment sealed something for me. This wasn't some scam. This was a family welcoming me, recognizing my skill, offering genuine connection. Her grandmother's tears felt more validating than any Michelin star ever could. On the motorbike taxi ride back to my apartment that night, Hoi An's lanterns reflecting off the river, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Purpose. The sense that maybe I could build something here after all. I should have remembered that in kitchens, the most dangerous time is when you think everything's under control. That's when you stop tasting, stop checking, stop staying vigilant. That's when things burn. The partnership became official a week after that dinner. Official in the sense that we shook hands and started making concrete plans. Official in the way that felt binding through shared vision and growing trust, if not yet through paperwork. Lynn explained the legal reality over coffee one morning. Foreigners can't own businesses in Vietnam. It's just the law. Her exact words. So everything would need to be in Vietnamese names. Her name, specifically, since her father owned the property and she had the business connections. But we'd have a written partnership agreement drawn up, guaranteeing me 50% ownership. It would all be legal, protected, just structured to work within Vietnamese regulations. That made sense to me. I'd heard similar things from other expats. Vietnam wasn't set up for foreign business ownership. You needed local partners, local structures. This was normal, practical. She took me to see the property that afternoon. Her father owned a narrow 3-story building about 5 minutes walk from the old town. Prime location but currently empty, previously used for fabric storage. The ground floor was perfect. High ceilings, good bones, windows facing the street. I could already see it. The kitchen along the back wall. 40 seats maximum, intimate spacing. A small bar near the entrance. European ambiance, but respecting the colonial architecture. We walked through it together, Lynn translating, as her father pointed out, features, structural elements, what could be modified. I was sketching in my mind. Workflow, equipment placement, customer flow. This could work. This could really work. The numbers Lynn presented felt reasonable. €15,000 for the lease deposit, initial kitchen equipment, and basic renovation materials. She had quotes from contractors, equipment suppliers, everything itemized. She'd done her homework. This wasn't vague or rushed. It was professional, transparent, and here's what made it feel legitimate. She was putting in sweat equity. She'd handle all the Vietnamese bureaucracy, translator work, supplier negotiations, permit applications. The things I couldn't do because I didn't speak the language, didn't understand the system, didn't have the connections. I was providing capital and culinary expertise. She was providing local knowledge and infrastructure. It felt fair, balanced, like an actual partnership. I transferred the €15,000 on a Wednesday morning, about 350 million dong, which sounds like a fortune until you realize it's just the cost of setting up a small restaurant. Lynn showed me each payment as it went out. Contractor deposits, equipment orders, lease agreement with her father, everything documented, everything explained. The renovation started within days. I'd arrive at the site every morning around 7, before the heat became unbearable. Vietnamese contractors were already there, tearing out old fixtures, exposing brick walls, rewiring electrical systems to handle commercial kitchen equipment. Lynn was there too, translating my specifications, coordinating between different trades, solving problems as they emerged. We fell into an easy rhythm. She'd bring Vietnamese coffee around 9, strong and sweet, and we'd review progress. I'd sketch kitchen configurations, explaining workflow logic, why the prep station needed to be here, why the stove placement mattered. She'd nod, translate to contractors, make sure it got done right. Her cousin Than started showing up regularly, helping negotiate with suppliers, getting better rates on materials. He worked in construction, Lynn explained, family helping out. He'd joke in Vietnamese with the contractors, occasionally translating jokes for me that probably lost something in translation. But he seemed decent, hard-working, the kind of family support that made the partnership feel even more legitimate. Lynn remembered details, my coffee order, that I preferred banh mi from the vendor on Tran Phu Street, the one who used real pâté instead of the cheap substitute. She'd laugh at my Irish expressions when something went wrong, when I'd say Jesus or fair play to describe whatever small disaster had emerged that day. It wasn't romantic. She maintained clear professional boundaries, always had. But it was intimate in the way partnerships become when you're building something together. Spending 10 hours a day in the same space, solving problems, sharing frustrations, and small victories. The menu started taking shape in my head and on paper. French-inspired dishes using Vietnamese ingredients. Coq au vin with local chicken and fish sauce depth. Duck confit with lemongrass. Irish lamb stew elevated with Vietnamese herbs. Beef bourguignon using local beef and palm sugar. A wine list focusing on value, affordable French and Australian bottles that would appeal to both expats and adventurous Vietnamese diners. We'd argue about it sometimes, productive arguments. She'd push me to consider Vietnamese palates, how they approach seasoning differently, portion expectations, the importance of rice or noodles as accompaniments even in European dishes. I'd insist on maintaining authenticity, not bastardizing French technique just to make it more familiar. These felt like healthy creative tensions, the kind that make concepts stronger. One evening, sitting on plastic stools outside the construction site, sharing a bottle of cheap wine and watching motorbikes stream past, Lynn asked about my family. I told her about my children, my daughter who worried too much, my son who'd inherited none of my interest in cooking. The divorce I still didn't fully understand, the years that had led me here, to this narrow street in Hoi An, building a restaurant with someone I'd known for 2 months. She listened without judgment, told me about her own life. Growing up in Hoi An, studying hospitality in Saigon, returning home when her mother got sick. The restaurant dreams she'd shelved because she wasn't a chef, didn't have the technical skills. How meeting me felt like the universe finally aligning things properly. I believed her completely. That night, I emailed my daughter, attached photos of the construction site, mentioned my business partner, described the concept. I downplayed the financial commitment, made it sound smaller than it was, more cautious than it felt. I wasn't ready for her concern yet, wasn't ready to defend decisions I was still convincing myself were sound. The space started looking beautiful. Exposed brick where we'd torn away old plaster. Custom lighting. Lynn had sourced from Da Nang, tables and chairs that mixed colonial style with modern comfort. The kitchen was coming together exactly as I'd envisioned. A proper 6-burner range, adequate prep space, refrigeration that would actually maintain temperature, equipment that would let me cook properly, professionally, the way I'd cooked for 42 years. I'd stand in that emerging space some mornings before anyone else arrived, imagining it full, hearing the sounds of service, smelling the food, feeling that particular satisfaction of a well-run kitchen producing quality work. This was going to happen. I was going to matter again. 3 months in, I'd invested €15,000 and countless hours of labor, and we had the skeleton of something beautiful. The partnership felt solid. Lynn and I had developed the kind of shorthand that comes from shared purpose. Her family treated me with warmth and respect. Dan would invite me for beer some evenings, practice his English, ask about Irish culture and cooking traditions. I started sleeping better than I had in years. The purpose, the structure, the daily progress toward a concrete goal. This was what I'd been missing. This was what made getting out of bed feel worthwhile. I should have been checking documents. I should have been insisting on seeing the partnership agreement in English, verified by a lawyer. I should have been asking harder questions about why everything was in Vietnamese names only, why there was no legal structure that included me explicitly. But I didn't, because I was happy, because the work felt real and the relationships felt genuine, because 42 years in kitchens had taught me to trust my instincts about ingredients and technique, and I mistakenly believed those instincts extended to people and partnerships. Because I needed this to work so badly that I couldn't afford to doubt it. The first real complication came in month 5. We were supposed to be getting permits, final approvals from the health department and fire marshal that would let us move toward opening. Instead, Lynn started showing up at the site with increasingly complicated explanations about delays. The health department wanted upgraded ventilation systems, she explained, beyond what we'd initially planned. Something about new regulations for restaurants serving European food, requirements for proper exhaust capacity when cooking with butter and oils at high temperatures. Made sense, I supposed. Different cooking methods than traditional Vietnamese street food. The fire marshal had issues too. Additional safety features needed. Emergency exits that met commercial code. Fire suppression systems above the stoves. All reasonable, all legitimate sounding, but expensive. €22,000, expensive. That's about 520 million dong. Half, again, what I'd already invested. Lynn showed me revised quotes, letters from officials that looked official enough even though I couldn't read Vietnamese. She seemed as frustrated as I was. This is how Vietnam works, she said. The rules aren't written down clearly. Officials have discretion. You find out what they want as you go, and there were facilitation fees. She said it carefully, watching my reaction. Not bribes, exactly, more like administrative processing fees. For officials who needed to prioritize our application, move it through the system faster. This is business culture here, she explained. Everyone does it. Without these fees, we could be waiting 6 months, a year. Other businesses would slip ahead of us. I'd heard about this from other expats. The informal economy of permissions in Vietnam. It made me deeply uncomfortable. 42 years in legitimate kitchens, paying taxes, following health codes. This felt dodgy, corrupt. But Lynn seemed as annoyed as I was. You think I like it? She'd asked. This is my country, my city. But this is reality. We can be idealistic and fail, or practical and succeed. I transferred the €22,000 on a Friday afternoon, watched my bank balance drop to 48,000, just over half my divorce settlement gone, into permits, ventilation, fire safety, facilitation fees for officials whose names I'd never know. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan in my apartment turned lazy circles, doing nothing against the heat. I checked my bank balance 3 times on my phone, like the numbers might change if I looked again. They didn't. Maybe we should slow down, I suggested to Lynn the next morning. Just pause. Make sure everything's in order before committing more. She pulled out the permit timeline. Documents with official stamps, processing stages highlighted. We're so close, Declan. See? Final approval expected in 3 weeks. If we stop now, we lose momentum. Her father has other people interested in the property. They're being patient because of our project, but they won't wait forever. And all the money you've invested, if we stop now, it's wasted. Sunk costs with nothing to show. That logic clicked with my restaurant experience. I'd seen projects fail because people lost nerve halfway through. In kitchen terms, you can't pull a dish off the heat halfway through cooking and expect it to be salvageable later. You commit, you see it through. So I committed. Month 6 brought structural problems. The contractor discovered issues with the building's foundation, Lynn explained one morning. Her face was stressed, genuinely upset. Old wiring that couldn't handle our kitchen equipment load. The whole electrical system needed replacing. Fire safety, she said. Liability. If something happened because we cut corners, the contractor needed €18,000 up front for materials and specialized electrical work. And here's where things shifted slightly. Lynn's father was supposed to contribute at this stage. That had always been the understanding. Her family's building, her family's investment alongside mine. But now, there was a problem. Her father's property business had cash flow issues. Something about delayed sales, buyers backing out, money tied up in other projects. Could I bridge the gap, temporarily? Once her father's situation stabilized, I'd be repaid. Or it would count against their contribution, even us out. I was at €55,000 invested, 65% of my settlement. I had 30,000 left in reserve. The panic was starting to set in, like water creeping under a door. I'd wake at 3 in the morning, sheets soaked with sweat that had nothing to do with heat, mind racing through numbers. What if this failed? What if I lost everything? I'd be a 61-year-old chef in a foreign country with barely enough money to survive a year. But what was the alternative? Walk away now? Lose the 55,000 already invested? Watch someone else open a restaurant in a space I'd planned, using equipment I'd bought, cooking dishes I'd designed. I transferred the €18,000. My bank balance showed 30,000 remaining. That's about 700 million dong. In Vietnam, a decent amount. In terms of my entire future, terrifying. Enough to return to Ireland with dignity. Not enough to start over anywhere else. Just enough to keep limping forward or survive poorly for a limited time. I started sleeping badly, really badly. I'd check my bank balance obsessively, morning coffee, lunch, before bed, like looking at it more frequently might make the numbers better. And I started noticing things. Small things at first. Her cousin Dawn was at the site more frequently, giving instructions to contractors. Decisions were being made without consulting me. When I'd arrive in the morning, work would have progressed overnight in directions I hadn't approved. Not wrong exactly, but different from what we'd discussed. When I mentioned it to Lynn, she'd explain it away. Dan is just trying to help. He knows construction, knows how to get things done efficiently. We're trying to move faster, get to opening. You want to be consulted on every minor decision. We trust each other, don't we? The partnership agreement still hadn't materialized. Lynn kept saying the lawyer was preparing it, translating everything properly, making sure it was legally sound. These things take time in Vietnam, she'd explain. The legal system is slow, but it's coming. When I pushed harder, asked to see the documents, even in Vietnamese, she'd get quietly hurt. You don't trust me? After all these months? After my grandmother wept over your cooking? After my family welcomed you? Haven't I been transparent about every expense? And she had been. I had receipts, contractor invoices, equipment purchase records, everything documented. The problem was, none of it had my name on it. None of it proved ownership, just expenses I'd paid for work on someone else's property. My daughter called one Sunday afternoon. How's the restaurant going, Da? Her voice was careful, the way it got when she was worried but trying not to show it. Grand, I lied. Coming along nicely. Should be open in a few months. And this partner of yours, Lynn? Everything working out okay? Yeah. She's sound. Knows the local systems. I'd be lost without her, honestly. And you've got proper contracts and everything? Legal protections? The question hit like a slap. Of course, I said. All above board. Don't worry about me. When we hung up, I sat on my balcony for 2 hours, watching motorbikes stream past below, feeling sick. I'd just lied to my daughter. Because telling the truth meant admitting I'd invested €55,000 in a business I had no legal claim to, with a woman I'd known for less than 6 months, in a country whose language I couldn't speak. When I suggested to Lynn that my name should appear somewhere on permits, she'd explain patiently why that would complicate everything. Vietnamese law is strict about foreign ownership. If we indicate foreign investment, we void our applications. Start over from scratch, lose months of time and tens of thousands in fees we've already paid. We're working within the system, Declan, not against it. I'd nod and tell myself I was being paranoid, applying European logic to Vietnamese culture. This is how things worked here. Extended family involvement, collective decision-making, trust-based partnerships that didn't need Western-style documentation. She'd introduce me to her grandmother, for Christ's sake. You don't introduce someone to your grandmother if you're planning to scam them. But at night, alone in my apartment, the doubts would crawl back. Every instinct I'd developed over 42 years in professional kitchens was screaming that something was off. The way you know when a sauce has split before you see it. When fish is turned before you smell it. When timing is wrong before service crashes. I just couldn't afford to listen. Because listening meant admitting I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Meant walking away from €55,000. Meant returning to Ireland as a complete failure. Meant proving my ex-wife right. Proving my children's concerns valid. Proving I was a foolish old man who'd let loneliness and desperation cloud his judgment. So I talked myself down. Blame stress, financial anxiety, cultural adjustment. Told myself to trust the process, trust Lynn, trust that we were close now, so close. The restaurant was starting to look beautiful after all. The kitchen was nearly complete. The dining room had character. This was real. This was happening. I just needed to hold my nerve a little longer. Looking back now, I understand that was the moment I should have walked away. Taken the loss, learned the lesson, cut my losses at 55,000 instead of 67,000. But desperation doesn't do mathematics well, and hope is more expensive than any ingredient I ever purchased in 42 years of cooking. Month 8. We were so close I could taste it. Not metaphorically. Actually taste it. The permits were promised within 2 weeks. Final approvals coming any day. The space looked stunning. Exposed brick walls glowing under custom lighting. Tables arranged perfectly, creating intimate spaces while maintaining workflow. The kitchen. Jesus, the kitchen. 6-burner commercial range that responded like a dream. Prep stations laid out exactly as I'd designed. Refrigeration humming at perfect temperature. This was a professional kitchen. This was where I could cook properly again. Lynn needed €12,000 more. Final push, she called it. Staff hiring, initial inventory, marketing materials, grand opening event. We'd set an opening date, 6 weeks out. Real and official, announced on social media. This was happening. She needed to hire servers, train them properly, needed to stock the wine cellar, build initial food inventory, pay for professional photography of the space and dishes for marketing, and the grand opening event. Local food bloggers, expat community influencers, Vietnamese media. This would make or break our launch. €12,000, 280 million dong. I looked at my bank balance. €18,000 remaining. That was it. That was everything left for my divorce settlement except what I'd already poured into this restaurant. 18,000 was barely enough to live on for a year in Vietnam if I was careful. And careful meant rice and street food, no luxuries, constant anxiety. But we were 6 weeks from opening, 6 weeks from revenue, from success, from mattering again. I transferred €12,000. My bank balance showed €6,000, 140 million dong. In Vietnamese terms, enough to survive maybe 4 months if nothing went wrong. In terms of security, nothing. A cough away from destitute. €67,000 invested. 79% of my entire divorce settlement. Everything I had to show for 28 years of marriage, 42 years of professional cooking, 61 years of life. All of it sitting in a restaurant. I had no legal proof of owning. But I was training staff. 5 Vietnamese cooks, young and eager, who showed up every morning ready to learn European technique. I taught them knife skills, showed them how to properly deglaze a pan, explained the difference between sautéing and pan frying. They listened intently, practiced seriously, asked smart questions. I was sourcing ingredients, building relationships with wholesalers. The fish supplier knew to save the best cuts for me. The vegetable vendor would text when special items came in. I was creating a network, a system, the foundation of a functioning kitchen. The menu was finalized and printed. Beautiful cards, heavy stock, bilingual. My dishes described in English and Vietnamese. French onion soup with local herbs. Coco vin, the way her grandmother remembered. Irish lamb stew elevated with lemongrass and lime leaves. Beef bourguignon, using Vietnamese palm sugar for depth. Duck confit with fish sauce caramel. It was my life's work condensed into 8 entrees, 4 starters, 3 desserts. Every dish I'd perfected over decades, adapted for Vietnam, ready to serve. Social media accounts launched. Maison du Mekong. Professional photos of the space. Teaser shots of dishes I'd prepared for photography. Coming soon posts in Vietnamese and English. Lynn handled the Vietnamese marketing, building buzz in the local community. I wrote English descriptions targeting expats, emphasizing authentic European technique, quality ingredients, passion for food. We were getting followers, comments, interest, people asking about opening date, making reservation inquiries. This was real marketing, real anticipation, real business development. But I started noticing disconnects. Supplier meetings would happen without me. I'd arrive at the restaurant to find Lynn finishing conversations with produce vendors, meat suppliers, wine distributors. When I'd ask what was arranged, she'd give summaries. Good prices, quality products, reliable delivery. Don't worry, Declan, I'm handling it. But these were my relationships, my suppliers. I'd spent weeks building trust, explaining quality standards, teaching them what I needed. Now decisions were being made without me in the room. The partnership agreement still hadn't materialized. 9 months in. €67,000 invested, no legal documentation with my name on it. The lawyer is finalizing it, Lynn would say. Vietnamese legal system is slow, but it will be ready before opening. Don't worry. But I was worried. I was terrified. Her cousin Thon was now effectively acting as manager, coordinating with staff, handling scheduling, making operational decisions. This was supposed to be my role, chef and co-owner, running both kitchen and operations. Instead, I was being positioned as just the cook, the technical expert, not the owner. When I questioned this, Lynn explained patiently, "We're trying to spare you the communication burden. Let you focus on what you do best. The kitchen, the food." Thonch speaks Vietnamese, understands local labor law, can handle staff management. You'll be free to cook. It sounded reasonable, but it felt wrong. 2 weeks before opening, I had a moment of absolute clarity that terrified me more than anything in my life. I was sitting in my apartment at 3 in the morning, couldn't sleep again, and I realized I had no legal documentation proving anything. No ownership papers, no partnership agreement, no contracts, no receipts in my name, nothing. I had bank transfer records showing I'd sent money to Lynn's accounts. That's it. Electronic receipts proving I'd transferred €67,000 to someone in Vietnam. The restaurant was in her name. The business license would be in her name. The permits in her name. The equipment purchased in her name. The lease with her father. Everything was Nguyen family property. I'd built an entire restaurant with no paper trail connecting me to it. The panic was physical. Heart racing, hands shaking, room spinning. I was going to vomit or pass out or both. I showed up at the restaurant at 7 that morning. Lynn was already there, reviewing inventory lists. "We need to talk," I said. My Cork accent was thick, the way it gets when I'm stressed. "We need legal documentation now. Today. Not next week. Not before opening. Today." She looked up, surprised. "Declan, what's wrong?" "Everything is in your name. I have nothing proving my ownership, my investment, my role. Nothing with Declan O'Sullivan on it, anywhere." Her expression shifted, became defensive. "You don't trust me? After 9 months? After everything we've built together?" "It's not about trust. It's about legal protection. Any business needs proper documentation." Her exact words were, "You think I'm trying to cheat you? After my family welcomed you? After my grandmother wept over your cooking? After all my work, all the bureaucracy I've navigated, all the problems I've solved? You think this is a scam?" "No," I said, "but I need documentation. Partnership agreement. Something with my name on it. Legally binding. The partnership agreement is with the lawyer. It will be ready before opening." "Why are you panicking now? We're 2 weeks away from success, from your dream coming true. And you're destroying trust over paperwork?" I felt myself backing down. Because she had a point, didn't she? She'd been transparent about expenses. She'd worked tirelessly. Her family had welcomed me. This wasn't how scams worked. Scams were quick, obvious, desperate. This was a legitimate business, professionally run, family-backed. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was applying European legal thinking to Vietnamese family culture. Maybe my anxiety was just financial stress manifesting as distrust. I apologized. Blamed sleepless nights, money worries, cultural adjustment. Said I trusted her, believed in the partnership, just needed reassurance. She softened. "I understand," she said. "This is stressful for everyone. But we're so close. Don't let fear ruin everything now." I nodded, talked myself down from my own instincts, convinced myself I was overreacting. But that night, alone in my apartment with €6,000 in my bank account and 67,000 invested in a business I couldn't prove I owned, I understood something terrible. I'd crossed a point of no return. I'd invested so much I couldn't afford to walk away. The losses would be catastrophic. I'd have nothing. I'd be a 61-year-old failure in a foreign country with barely enough money to survive a few months. So I had to believe, had to trust, had to ignore every warning signal my professional instincts were screaming. Because the alternative was admitting I'd destroyed my entire future through desperate, reckless stupidity. And I wasn't ready to admit that yet. 6 weeks until opening, I told myself. 6 weeks until revenue. 6 weeks until this all makes sense. Just hold on, 6 more weeks. I arrived at the restaurant at 6:30 in the morning, 2 weeks before opening. Earlier than usual, but I couldn't sleep anyway. I wanted to do a final systems check on the kitchen. Test the ranges one more time, verify refrigeration temperatures, make sure everything was perfect. The door was unlocked. Odd, but maybe Lynn had come in early too. I heard voices from inside, English voices, Western. I walked in and found Lynn with a couple. Western, probably mid-50s, well-dressed tourists by the look of them. She was walking them through the dining room, gesturing at features, speaking in that professional tour guide voice, and I heard her say it, clear as anything. "This is my family's new restaurant. We're opening in 2 weeks. If you're interested in running a Western food concept in Hoi An, the space is available for lease. Prime location, fully equipped kitchen, all permits in place." The confusion hit me like a physical blow. My family's restaurant, available for lease. I stood there, frozen, trying to make the words make sense. The couple noticed me. The man smiled politely. "You work here?" "I'm Declan O'Sullivan," I said, "co-owner and head chef." They looked puzzled. Glanced at Lynn. She hadn't mentioned a partner. Lynn's face did something I'd never seen before. For just a split second, cold irritation flashed across her features. Pure annoyance at my interruption. Then it was gone, replaced by her professional smile. "These are potential investors," she said smoothly. "They're interested in putting additional capital into the business for marketing and expansion. I was just showing them what we've built." The couple looked uncomfortable. Said they'd think about it, took a business card, left quickly. The moment the door closed, I turned on her. What the hell was that? My family's restaurant. Available for lease? She stayed calm. Too calm. Practiced. Declan, you misunderstood. They're potential investors. I've been talking to several people about bringing in additional funding. This is normal business development. You said your family's restaurant. You said it's available for lease. Like I don't exist. You're overreacting. I was simplifying for them. They're not Vietnamese. They don't understand partnership structures here. I was going to explain the full arrangement if they were seriously interested. But something had broken in me. 9 months of doubt. 9 months of suppressed panic. 9 months of warning bells I'd ignored. They all came crashing down at once. No, I said. My voice was shaking, my Cork accent thick enough to cut. No more explanations, no more tomorrow. I want to see the ownership documents, now today. The business license, the partnership agreement, the property lease, everything with my name on it. Right now. Lynn's expression shifted, became guarded. Declan, calm down. The documents are at my father's office. We can review everything tomorrow when you're not emotional. I'm not leaving until I see proof of ownership. My ownership, 9 months. 67,000 euro. And I have nothing with my name on it. Nothing. You're being paranoid. Show me the documents. We stood there, locked in silence. The beautiful restaurant around us. The kitchen I'd designed. The dining room I'd envisioned. All of it suddenly feeling like it belonged to someone else. She made a phone call. Rapid Vietnamese, her tone sharp, annoyed. Within 30 minutes, her cousin Thon arrived. His English suddenly much better than he'd ever let on before. We'll go to the office, Thon said. See the paperwork. But you need to calm down, Declan. You're causing problems. They took me to a small office a few blocks away. Her father was there. Older man who barely spoke English, looking uncomfortable. He produced a folder of documents. Everything in Vietnamese. Lynn started translating, pointing at sections, explaining what things meant. But I'd learned enough in 9 months to know she was being selective. No, I said. Proper translator. Independent. Now. I found one through an expat legal service I'd seen advertised online. Paid 300,000 dong for urgent service. The translator arrived within an hour. A middle-aged Vietnamese woman with perfect English and a professional manner. She read through the documents methodically. Her face stayed neutral, but I could see her understanding what this was. The property, she said, is registered to Nguyen Ban Hai, her father's name. This is correct for the property ownership, the business license. I need to know about the business license. She found it. Read through carefully. The business is registered as Maison du Mekong Restaurant. Operators listed are Nguyen Lin and Nguyen Thong. No foreign business participation registered. No partnership structure. My name? I asked, my voice barely working. Declan O'Sullivan. Is my name anywhere? She checked again. No, there is no mention of foreign partnership or investment. What about a partnership agreement? A contract guaranteeing me ownership? She looked through everything twice. There is no partnership agreement in these documents, no contract involving a foreign party. The equipment, the kitchen equipment I bought, listed as property of the business, which is owned entirely by Nguyen Lin and Nguyen Tan. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk to stay upright. 67,000 euro. 10 months of work. Everything I had. And legally, I owned nothing. My name appeared nowhere. I had no claim to anything. The translator looked at me with something like pity. I am sorry, she said quietly. This is not uncommon. I stood up. The rage was volcanic. 10 months of suppressed doubt erupting all at once. You stole from me. All of it. You planned this from the start. Lynn stayed calm, almost bored. We didn't steal anything, Declan. You transferred money willingly. You wanted to invest in a restaurant. You did invest in a restaurant. It exists. Your money went into creating a real business. A business I don't own. A business with my name nowhere on it. Her cousin stepped forward. His English was perfect now. No more halting translation. You need to understand Vietnamese law, Declan. Foreigners cannot own businesses. You knew this. We explained this. You transferred money to Lynn for business purposes. That's all the law sees. I'll go to the police. I'll sue. I'll get lawyers. His expression didn't change. You transferred money willingly. No contracts were signed promising ownership. You have bank records showing transfers. That's all. Vietnamese law doesn't recognize verbal agreements for foreign business ownership. And if you cause trouble, if you make problems for a legitimate Vietnamese business, if you cause the Nguyen family to lose face in their community, He paused. Let the threat hang. Visa renewals can become complicated. Officials don't like foreigners who create disturbances, who make accusations against respected local families. You understand? I understood. I understood I had no legal ground, no documents, no proof. Just bank transfers that showed I'd voluntarily sent money to someone in Vietnam. Lynn finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost kind. I think there has been a cultural misunderstanding, language barriers, different business expectations. I'm sorry you feel you were misled. That was never our intention. I wish you well, Declan. The dismissal was absolute. I'd been erased from my own restaurant. I walked out into Hoi An's late morning heat. The yellow buildings, the lanterns, the Thuban River glittering in sunlight. Everything that had seemed charming 9 months ago now felt like mockery, a beautiful trap. I walked to the riverbank where Lynn and I had first discussed the restaurant over coffee, sat on the same bench, watched the water flow past, the full weight of it crash down. 67,000 euro. Gone. Nearly 80% of my divorce settlement. Everything I'd salvaged from 28 years of marriage. Everything I had to show for 61 years of life. I had 6,000 euro left. Maybe 4 months of survival money in Vietnam. Not enough to return to Ireland with dignity. Not enough to start over anywhere. I'd built a restaurant I had no legal claim to. Trained staff who worked for someone else. Designed a menu that would be served under another family's name. Poured my expertise, my vision, my hope into something that would exist without any trace of me. And I'd done it willingly. Ignored every warning sign. Talked myself out of every doubt. Because I needed to believe so badly that I was building something beautiful again, that I mattered, that I had a future. 42 years in professional kitchens had taught me to spot when ingredients had gone bad, when mise en place was sloppy, when timing was off. I thought those instincts extended to people. I was wrong. I sat by that river until the afternoon heat drove even the tourists inside. Then I went back to my apartment and started figuring out how to survive on 6,000 euro while living in a foreign country where I'd just lost everything. I spent 3 days in that apartment, unable to eat. Ironic, isn't it? A chef who can't stomach food. But everything tasted like ash, like failure. I consulted 2 expat lawyers. Both said essentially the same thing, with varying degrees of sympathy, no contracts, willing transfers, no evidence of fraud under Vietnamese law. One of them, an Australian who'd been in Vietnam 20 years, put it bluntly, mate, it's an expensive lesson. Never invest here without your name on every document. Preferably with a Vietnamese spouse who's legally obligated to protect your interests. The casual cruelty of that advice. As if I could just rewind 10 months and marry someone instead. I couldn't stay in Hoi An. Too small. Too many memories on every street corner. Too much risk of running into Lynn, or seeing the restaurant open, or having to explain to people what happened. I moved to Da Nang, an hour north by bus, anonymous enough, found a studio apartment in a local neighborhood, far from the beach, far from tourists. $200 a month. Basic, but functional. My pension of 1,800 euro covers rent, food, electricity, not much else. I have 18,000 euro left from my original 85,000, my emergency reserve. I check the balance constantly, terrified to spend any of it. That money is the difference between surviving in Vietnam and being completely destitute in a foreign country. Work comes sporadically. Private chef gigs for wealthy expat families who want proper European food. Cooking classes for tourists who want to learn authentic techniques. Occasional catering for expat community events. Enough to survive, not enough to rebuild. I'm a 61-year-old chef with no restaurant, living in a foreign country with barely enough money to return home even if I wanted to. But returning means admitting complete failure to my children, my old colleagues, everyone back in Ireland. Means proving my ex-wife was right to leave. That I am exactly the foolish, impulsive person the divorce made me feel like. 3 months after the confrontation, Maison du Mekong's opening was announced on social media. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The photo showed Lynn and Thon cutting a ribbon, her father beaming in the background, the dining room I'd planned, the kitchen I'd designed. The menu was remarkably similar to what I'd created. French-Vietnamese fusion, Irish lamb stew with lemongrass, my signature coq au vin, duck confit with fish sauce caramel. Reviews started appearing. Innovative European cuisine, authentic French technique, beautiful space, excellent wine list, my cooking. my concept, my vision, served in a restaurant that bears no trace of my existence. The hardest part isn't even the money, though that devastation is real. It's the self-knowledge that I let it happen. I saw every red flag, the missing partnership agreement, my name appearing nowhere, Dawn taking over management, supplier meetings without me. Every warning sign was there, and I ignored them all, called them cultural differences, called my doubts paranoia, told myself I was applying European logic to Vietnamese family structures, because I needed to believe so badly in the partnership, in being valued, in building something beautiful again, in mattering. I abandoned every instinct 42 years in professional kitchens had given me. In a kitchen, you know when something's off, when ingredients have turned, when timing is wrong, when a dish won't work. I knew. Deep down, I knew, but I couldn't afford to know, so I didn't. My daughter learned the truth when she tried to wire me birthday money, and the bank told her how little remained in my account. The phone call was gentle, but devastating. Her careful voice asking if I was okay, really okay. Her offer to help financially. The unspoken question about how I could have been so stupid. I refused her help. Can't bear becoming my children's burden. They've got their own lives, their own families, their own financial pressures. This is my mistake, mine to live with. The ex-wife doesn't know the full story. I'll keep it that way. So here's what I learned, and I'm telling you this directly because maybe it'll save someone else from making my mistakes. In a kitchen, you taste everything before it goes to the customer. I forgot to apply that rule to my life. I wanted so badly to build something beautiful again, to matter to someone, that I ignored every bitter note. The truth is simple. If your name isn't on the paperwork, you don't own anything. Not in Vietnam, not anywhere. Cultural sensitivity can't excuse willful blindness. Partnership means legal protection, not emotional connection. Verbal promises mean nothing without documentation. And the most painful truth? When you're desperate to build something beautiful and be valued again, you become the easiest mark. Loneliness makes you vulnerable. Hope makes you reckless. And desperation makes you ignore every warning sign screaming in your face. I'm still in Vietnam, too broke to leave properly, too stubborn to give up completely. I cook for other people's families, teach their children techniques I once dreamed of passing on in my own restaurant. I build nothing of my own. I live small, careful, constantly afraid. Some days are better than others. But every day, I wake up knowing I destroyed my own future. Not because I was unlucky, because I chose hope over caution, trust over documentation, belief over evidence. That's the lesson. Learn it cheaper than I did. Our story today illustrates a pattern we see too often in Southeast Asia. The vulnerability of recently divorced men. The sophistication of long-con business scams that feel nothing like the obvious romance scams people warn about. The weaponization of cultural difference to deflect legitimate concerns. Maison du Mekong is still operating successfully in Hoi An. Reviews consistently praise the innovative European-Vietnamese fusion cuisine, the authentic French technique, the beautiful ambiance. Linh Nguyen has since consulted for 2 other expat-funded restaurants in central Vietnam. The pattern repeats because it works. Every year, new arrivals come to Vietnam with money, hope, and dreams. Every year, some of them believe their situation is different, their cultural sensitivity more sophisticated, their judgment more sound, their partnership more legitimate. They're not all scams. Many cross-cultural business partnerships in Vietnam succeed beautifully. Vietnamese business partners can be honest, protective, genuinely collaborative, but protection should never be sacrificed to prove trust. Here's the practical advice. Never invest in Vietnam without a legitimate Vietnamese legal representative, reviewing all documents before you transfer money. Never accept verbal partnership promises. Never allow cultural sensitivity to override basic business protection. And never invest money you can't afford to lose. Get your name on documents. Get contracts in English and Vietnamese, reviewed by independent lawyers. Get partnership structures registered officially. Get receipts in your name. Get legal protection before transferring a single dollar. And if someone says that's insulting, that it shows you don't trust them, that it's Western paranoia, that's exactly when you need protection most. Declan's story isn't about cultural prejudice. It's about understanding that vulnerability makes everyone susceptible to exploitation. That desperation to rebuild makes people ignore their own better judgment. That hope, unprotected by documentation, can cost you everything. If you're watching this because you're considering a business venture in Vietnam, learn from Declan. Protect yourself legally before investing emotionally or financially. If you're already in a situation that feels uncertain, get independent legal advice now, not tomorrow. Not when the partnership agreement is ready, now. And if you've been through something similar, you're not alone. Share your experience in the comments. Help others learn from your mistakes. Let your expensive lesson become someone else's free education. This has been Inside Vietnam. Stay careful out there.